All right. And then we'll go live. And I got a new puppy, so if it starts to, my apologies. Her name's
awesome.
Yoko.
That's so great. Or terrifying. I don't know, depending on what kind of fan you are. Mixed messages with Yoko Ono, right?
Well, and then my other dog's John Lennon. He's named after Lennon.
Oh, I love it. Just letting Mercury be in retrograde and getting a puppy and naming it Yoko. This is just so many things. That's excellent.
Okay. Let's see. And she's a pacer, so.
I am too. We get along really well. My tiny apartment, I'm back and forth, like all day long on the phone when I'm not on Zoom, which is, life now. So.
Well, speaking of Zoom, we are live here on Facebook Live. I wanted to just welcome everyone who's watching. I hope there's folks watching. My name is Angelica Rubio. I represent District 35, which is mostly here in the city of Las Cruces. And tonight I'm partnering with my colleague from up north, Representative Andrea Romero.
Thank you, Representative Rubio. We're here tonight to talk about something that I think a lot of New Mexicans have been wondering what is going to be happening, which is housing. As we see this insane surge and this harrowing sort of time in New Mexico, we're trying to figure out, making sure that folks can shelter in place. And so I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight and for being able to share the word for folks that might be in a place that needs some help.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Representative. We'll talk a little bit about how we got here, but first I wanted to take a moment to introduce two of our most favorite allies in this work the last few months. First, we have Rebecca Velarde with the Mortgage Finance Authority. Rebecca, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And Maria Griego, who many of you have probably known through some of the other forums that we've had. She's with the Center for Law and Poverty. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Maria.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Well, we can start from the very beginning, if you like. Rep, do you want to start, or should I?
No, I'm happy to just talk a little bit about where we have come from with this, and thankfully we're in a place of actually celebration that we have some relief on the way for New Mexicans. We have been begging for this since March. Representative Rubio and I, when lockdowns went into place and we knew we were amidst a pandemic and we were starting to track COVID numbers, we knew that intuitively folks were going home and being asked to leave their jobs at the same amount of time. And so we didn't know what was going to stay open, what was going to close. But nevertheless, both in Las Cruces and here in Santa Fe, we were wondering, where are people going to go when they don't have rent to pay, if they're on an hourly wage or whatever it may be, if they've lost their job of no fault of their own, what's going to happen to their housing? And so we found out that we were both working on this issue at that time in March and started networking the ideas. That's why you see Maria and Rebecca here today to help us with these problem-solving issues. During that time, we started looking for any resource that we possibly could. Of course, the CARES Act passed, and then we had our special session. We came up with a lot of different housing legislation pieces in order to first enact the fact that we do have a moratorium on eviction for folks. They should be sheltering in place, and we've seen that reinforced both by a CDC order that currently exists, as well as the ongoing Supreme Court order. Unfortunately, evictions are still being processed. This is something that I know Rep. Rubio and I are kept up at night about. This is something that we've been trying to figure out. Both, I'm getting messages from both landlords and tenants, figuring out what do we do? What do we do here if they don't have a job? If we're, if we're in a position where, we're making a fraction of what we used to, and we're getting a unemployment insurance check, and it's just not enough to make the rent, or it's just not enough to make a housing payment. So what we have worked through in the past several months, and despite the fact that the bureaucratic system is way too slow, we're at a point finally where we do have retroactive funding available for folks for 3 months of housing, to work with your landlord to get your bills paid, in particular for housing. So we're not talking about utilities, we're not talking about any of that. There are other protections. We'd be happy to help you with that. But specifically for your housing situation, funds are coming November 2nd. Rebecca will provide details, but we're in a place now at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday where we have something to actually provide to folks, knowing that this has been such a critical issue since March, and since folks have been in a position where they didn't know necessarily where their next rent or mortgage paycheck would come from. So hang on and hang tight. We have a lot of information for you, but definitely mark your calendar for November 2nd to get your financial information in order to be able to, all you have to do is demonstrate financial need. Rebecca will talk about the details and how to get that information. But what we are really excited about is the fact that the state is now stepping their game up and providing resources for us, despite the wrestling match that we've had to have to get here. We're very, very grateful that we're in a place to actually provide. And while folks are scared with the rising COVID numbers, myself included, this hits close to home for me. We want people to be able to have a safe shelter. And so this is really important, and we want to spread the word. So if you know anybody that's in this situation, we want to be able to give them the information that they need. nmhousing.org is where to start, and we'll start providing some more information here. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope we can do anything we can to help. Oh, I think you're muted, Angelica. So there you go.
It's the line of the year. I think you're muted. Thanks everyone. So far we do have some viewers. Before I move it on to Rebecca, just folks, we are going to be taking questions towards the end of this conversation. So over the course of the next, right now, and we're going to talk mostly about MFA and know your rights. And then we'll leave the last 20 to 15 minutes for questions. Please make sure that you ask those questions in the comment section of the Facebook Live. I know that we have a couple people who have logged in. You can feel free to use, you can ask questions on the Zoom webinar, and we're happy to answer questions. One thing that I did want to also mention is that there's also a lot of Spanish speaking communities and other indigenous communities, monolingual speaking, that we aren't going to be able to address in your language tonight. And for that, I apologize. But the hope is that we can be an ongoing resource for you and for many others over the course of the next few months to make sure that you have the tools and the resources that you need to make sure that you stay in your shelter, because that is our number one priority right now at this moment. So with that, Rebecca, I wanted to hand it over to you so you can talk about Mortgage Finance Authority and the rollout.
Thank you, Representative Romero and Representative Rubio. You guys have just been such amazing partners, and we really appreciate it. So again, my name is Rebecca. I'm with the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority, which is the state's housing finance agency, which means our responsibility is to be the provider of affordable housing opportunities to New Mexicans. As Representative Romero just summarized, we've been working really closely with both Representative Romero and Rubio on this issue of housing insecurity due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like just to thank them for their advocacy, and as well as the governor's office. They were great advocates as well, and the Department of Finance and Administration, who is going to grant us money to provide housing assistance to people affected by the pandemic. So we've been working very, very hard, and we're happy to say we will have the program launched at 8 a.m. on November 2nd. The program window for the first round is November 2nd at 8 a.m. to November 13th at 5 p.m. And during this time, you will be able to go to our website and apply for housing assistance. And our website is www.housingnm.org. And there's a button there that says COVID-19 rental and homeownership assistance. So if you are a renter or a homeowner, please feel free to visit. Now, there are a few qualifications that I'd like to go through with you. This is a federal funding source, so there are some rules that we have to follow. First, you would need to be 80% of your county's area median income or below, and on our website, there is a sheet that shows what those incomes are. It varies based on both the county and your household size. Also, you would need to show financial hardship due to COVID-19. So if you filed for unemployment, you would have to give us the unemployment benefits letter, or if you could show a wage reduction or reduced hours, anything that shows some kind of financial hardship to get the funding. Next, we would also need a delinquency notice. So the delinquency notice that either your landlord or your servicer provided to you, and also if you are in a mobile home, we are also providing assistance to you if it's your lot payment or the lien on your mobile home. Any of that, please send us your delinquency notice. So those are kind of the three major things that we will be looking for, other than obviously residents in New Mexico. Now, so the program is available across the state. We are making sure that we are trying to serve everybody very equally. And additionally, for tribal, if you live on tribal land, because of the strong effects that this pandemic has had on our tribal members and people living on tribal land, we will not require the income documentation. So if you live on tribal land, you will not need to show that you're 80% of area median income or below. You'll just have to show financial hardship and a delinquency notice. Now, how do you apply for the program? So we have an online system, and at our website, there's a kind of a spot saying, click here come November 2nd. You'll click there, and you will be able to upload all of your documentation into there to apply for the program. You'll be able to apply to the program. Everything can be online. You'll also be able to do it from your mobile device if that is your preference. Now, there are some people that don't have as good of internet access or just prefer not to do it that way. If you are one of those individuals, please give us a call. There is a toll-free number on our website, and we will mail you a paper application. And you can drop it off at one of several places, or you could mail it in, and that is definitely an acceptable way to document too. So once it get in, all the information comes in, we will look through it, we will approve it. We will likely contact your housing provider because they'll need to provide us information so we can cut them a check, and then we would make a payment directly to your housing provider. Now, this program would provide up to $1,500 a month for 3 consecutive months. So, but each time you would need to have a delinquency notice. So let's say you have a delinquency notices for August, September, and October. Come November 2nd, you would be able to apply for all 3 months. If you only have a delinquency notice for October or November, you could apply for just that month. And if there's funding left over in the next months, you would be able to just simply sign a form saying that my situation hasn't changed. Here's my delinquency notice for December, and we will make that payment as well. So again, we want to be available. We want to be helpful. So on our website, there is both an email so that you can email us if you have questions. We also have a 1-800 number where you can talk to one of our many staff that want to help you. Additionally, if you are having technical issues with the website, there's information there as to how to work through any website or application issues. We're really excited about this program. You know, there was a study done recently by the National Coalition of State Housing Agencies that shows 60 to 80,000 renters are at risk of eviction in New Mexico right now, of 60 to 80,000 households. Additionally, come January, when the CDC eviction moratorium is up, New Mexican renters are supposed to be around $105 million to $153 million behind in rent. And that's just the renters. The homeowners are suffering too. So we know there's a need out there and we really want to help. So we strongly encourage that you apply to this program.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. I went ahead, for folks who are watching on Facebook Live, I included the link to the MFA Housing to look and review all of the COVID assistance. So if you have any questions, please go into that link and just hopefully it'll answer the questions that you have. Otherwise, again, please, there's a phone number there that you can call, and we're hopeful that we can do our best to address any of the housing issues that you all might have. Maria, I wanted to pass it over to you. I know that there's questions. There's one question so far that we can start to address once you're done, but really, I think at this point, we know that we have some funding available to support families who are facing evictions. But what can folks do in the meantime? Folks who may already be thinking that they're going to have issues with their housing, maybe already missed a monthly payment, maybe two. What are some of the steps that folks can be taking in a number of different scenarios?
Thank you again so much for the invitation to participate tonight, Representative Rubio and Representative Romero. I so appreciate the partnership that we've created since the beginning of this pandemic, and worked frequently with Rebecca Velarda as well. And I just so appreciate the time and the advocacy that you all have dedicated to this very important cause. You know, New Mexico was already in a housing crisis before the onset of COVID-19. As an example, between 2018 and 2019, we had the highest increase in homelessness in the nation. We also had the highest increase in chronic homelessness in the nation. We also have data from the Mortgage Finance Authority that shows that huge numbers of New Mexico's renters are cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And also a huge share of renters are extremely cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 50% of their income on housing costs. So these problems were around since before the pandemic and have only been exacerbated by COVID-19. And we know that so many New Mexicans are struggling, that their biggest fear at night is wondering when they're going to get the eviction notice on their door, or when their landlord will say, I just can't give you any more time. I have to evict you and get a new tenant in here. And I hear from multiple New Mexicans throughout the day, almost every day, about these concerns. And we sympathize with landlords too, because landlords in New Mexico are really not like the landlords in big cities, big metropolitan areas where there are landlords who own multiple multi-million-dollar properties. A lot of landlords in New Mexico are mom and pop type landlords who really rely on the income they receive from their renters to make their own ends meet. And so we know that although there's different protections that have been put in place, and I'll talk about those here in a second, that help renters stay in their home for the time being, what's really needed is an investment in making sure that tenants can pay their rent, and that that we're not just kicking the can down the road, and that when all of these protections are lifted, that we have this huge onslaught of evictions, and that landlords can't pay their own bills. So it was so exciting to hear about the money that MFA got and will be dispersing. It's such an important program, and we're so excited to see that up and running. Excited to see that some local entities like City of Albuquerque, County of Bernalillo have invested funds into rental assistance. It's so important. That's what we need. But I also wanted to just share with anybody who may be watching what protections might be available if you are struggling to pay rent. And these protections, you know, while they're great, I'll be honest and say that there's been a lot of confusion because, you know, I don't think a lot of people were prepared for what was going to happen with this virus and the, you know, the domino effect of people being evicted from not being able to pay their rent. And so different governmental entities have come out with different protections, and oftentimes they overlap, or, you know, they expire and change, and it's created a lot of confusion for New Mexicans. But the first protection I wanted to talk about is protection from the New Mexico Supreme Court. And so early on during the pandemic, the New Mexico Supreme Court issued 2 orders. They basically operate the same, but one applies to mobile home parks and the rest applies to all other renters. And those orders just said that if a landlord files for eviction and takes the tenant to court, if the tenant tells the judge on the record that they have an inability to pay rent, it doesn't have to be COVID related, just an inability to pay rent, that the court is supposed to stay the eviction, meaning the judge might rule against you. The judge might say, you know, you didn't pay rent to your landlord for the last 3 months and you owe $3,000 or whatever the case might be, but you're not going to be physically removed from your house. So those cases are stayed. And those orders are, there's no expiration date. It says that they will be in place for the duration of the public health emergency. None of us know right now how long that will be. So no expiration there. But what we know is that not all judges are following these orders. I've heard many times, unfortunately, that tenants go to court, they tell the judge they have an inability to pay rent, and the judge still rules against them and orders them to be removed. So it's very concerning. You know, we've done the best we can. I know a lot of advocates have done the best they can to get the information out, but it's confusing. And the truth of the matter is that these orders are just not being applied uniformly across the state. So I would encourage anyone, if you have gone to court, you've told the judge that you have an inability to pay rent and the judge still ruled against you and ordered you to be removed from your home, that you either call the New Mexico Legal Aid, or you can call me at the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty. And luckily, I have access to interpreters for any language, so feel free to call. I can get on the phone with an interpreter and talk to you about your situation. The other protection I wanted to talk about, and Representative Romero alluded to this earlier, is an order issued by the Centers for Disease Control. And that was issued last month in September, but it expires at the end of the year, on December 31st. That order says that for any tenant who is struggling to pay rent, as long as they meet certain criteria, and I'll go over that, if they fill out this template declaration that tells their landlord they have an inability to pay rent, and they give it to the landlord is not supposed to take any action to remove the tenant from the home. The Centers for Disease Control later said landlords can still take tenants to court, but they cannot be removed. But the requirements for the CDC order are that you, as an individual, you have to make under $99,000 a year, or as a married couple, under $198,000 a year. You have to attest that you've sought all available governmental assistance. So for example, if you are in the city of Albuquerque, you have to attest that you've applied with the city of Albuquerque to get rental assistance, or later with MFA, for example. You also have to say that you'll make every effort to make partial payments to your landlord. So we are encouraging all renters, as soon as they know they will be unable to pay rent, that they fill out that declaration, and it's available on our website, but I can also make sure that it's linked here in this Facebook forum, so that tenants have access to that. But the moment you know you're not going to be able to pay rent, we encourage you to fill out that declaration seek assistance if you can, if it's available to you, but fill out that declaration and give it to your landlord, because that's probably the best way to keep you out of court right now. So those are the recommended steps. But again, I just want to say, these orders are temporary, and they're really kicking the can down the road. And so we're so excited to see that MFA has gotten this money, and they have this program to distribute it to tenants. And we need more money. We need more money going into rental assistance.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Maria, for all your efforts on this in this area, because I know that there's a lot of folks who are feeling really, really hopeless at this point. And so, yeah, we do need a lot of money. And the hope is that come January, the legislators, I know that Representative Romero and I are all in, but we also have to talk to several other legislators, both in the House and the Senate, who we hope will have the same commitment that we do when it comes to these issues around housing. Speaking of January and the legislative session, for those of you who may not know, we go back to Santa Fe in January for a 60-day session, and a big priority for all of us who are on this panel right now are to find ways to not only find the money to pay for all the things that we need related to housing and to keep folks in their homes and to keep their shelter, but to also make some systemic changes to policies that make it that much harder for people to stay in their homes. There's a lot of policies that exist within our state that legislators have passed and have supported in the past, that have been designed to make it harder for people, specifically those who who aren't really sure that this isn't part of their priority. We want to be able to challenge that and make it a priority for folks in January. And so, Representative Romero, I know that since you gave a really great overview at the beginning of our forum, can you share a little bit about the working groups that we have all been a part of over the course of the last 6 months and some of the pieces of legislation that we're considering? I know someone just commented asking to know who other legislators might be champions on this issue. And so I think this might be a good opportunity for us to talk about some of the ideas that we have for January and what kind of advocacy not only organizations throughout the state can be helping with, but also folks who are watching tonight, that they can contact their own legislators and push that they also support a lot of this legislation that we're thinking about.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think, everybody has eyes on not only what's going to happen in the next 13 days as well, which has a lot to do with some of the advocacy that we'll see come January. I've been hearing from a lot of the candidates up north in Taos, in northern New Mexico for Senate, Leo Jaramillo, Cristina Ortez, we have Roger Montoya. All of these folks are really very, very community oriented and very much want to be part of the change that we see moving into January. So the importance of voting, number one, and asking your potential legislator how they feel about affordable housing and access to housing is going to be important, and we can increase our allyship as we move forward. I have the fortunate position of being able to serve on the Mortgage Finance Authority committee. So there we see a lot of allies that have self-selected to really be on this committee to dig into a lot of housing work. Thankfully, one of my colleagues, and we share part of our district, Senator Nancy Rodriguez, she carries the Housing Trust Fund every year. We're hoping to increase that fund, at least keep it the same. We know we're going to be in a different financial position moving into January. She's carrying that. Of course, we're supporting this as well, along with Mortgage Finance Authority's broadening of their goals to help with ensuring that they can meet more of the demand in affordable housing around the state. So we absolutely support that. But aside from that, Representative Rubio and I are coming up with a housing omnibus package that we've been working on with many, many different advocates around the state. We meet on a weekly basis to talk about some of the issues in housing that we'd like to update. So forgive me for kind of reading a long list of things that we've unfortunately neglected, I think, in the many years with what Maria talked about, with the problems that we've continually had, not in the entire housing spectrum, from homelessness to of course the amount of rent that we have to pay, to just being able to meet the demands of that, whether you're in a homeowner situation or a rental situation. So what we're hoping to do come January is first to strengthen this moratorium on housing while we're in the midst of an emergency order. Currently, like many have said, we are still seeing evictions being processed. We don't know why. I wish we had an answer for why this was happening. And to the many people who have had to change housing, I've heard from constituents myself that have just said, in the resilience that they have, they're just trying to downsize. They're just trying to, figure out how to make ends meet before knowing that they're in completely dire straits after, these rental assistance payments or some of these unemployment insurances go away. So we've already seen folks on the ground moving in order to make ends meet. So we want to be able to create a force field around this moratorium so folks can actually shelter in place, and that landlords are getting their money and renters are getting the money to be able to pay this, again, of no fault of their own. Folks have lost their employment, or their paychecks have decreased so significantly that they can't make these rents or pay their mortgages. So that too, we're trying to ensure that folks feel empowered, whether you're on Section 8, HUD, veterans assistance, that your landlord cannot basically not allow you to stay there, not allow you to rent there. What we're seeing is some housing discrimination in some landlords deciding that if you're getting an assistance check, that they can bar you from entry. And we want to make sure that that's something that is never an option that you have to, that landlords have to evict you and or not allow you to live in a place just because you may be getting an assistance check from somewhere. We're updating the timetable on evictions. Often right now, once you get a piece of paper, not only is it absolutely alarming with what to do, the process moves very quickly and is certainly not in favor of those who are trying to pick up the pieces and move things forward. We want to help folks empower themselves, apply the legal system so they have advocacy, and of course, find the tools to be able to speak on behalf of themselves in an eviction situation. So we're trying to make that more user-friendly for those who definitely want to make things right. Again, we're looking at state rent control repeal. Right now, the state has decided that rent control is a state decision, whether it's Santa Fe, Las Cruces, or Hobbs. That doesn't make any sense to us, that the state should be in control. We want to repeal that act and give local communities control over how if they need to help with rent control and rent control acts. I know in Santa Fe, we see sometimes 70 or 80% of incomes being spent on rent. The average, we were saying, is way too high. The Mortgage Finance Authority was talking about 30% of folks spending their incomes on rent. We want to make this affordable. We want folks to thrive, be able to put a bit of money away, let their kids go to college, go on vacation, whatever it may be. But this is important to ensure that we decrease the amount of rent that people are paying and empower communities to take control of that if need be. There are so many other options for us that we're trying to go for, including getting a bigger picture on housing in New Mexico. Currently, we don't have a strategy. We don't have a housing department per se. We're looking more so at how to convene all of the spectrum of ideas right now, not to tell folks what to do, but basically to get all of the brain trust in the room and really figure out how we do better in housing across the state. Again, from home homelessness, to those that are maybe moving out of their home, starting a first job, or in college and so on and so forth. They're moving out, they're on fixed income. How do we create a strategy for sustainable housing, for affordable housing, and for moving us into, this direction moving forward of providing everyone safe and healthy housing, so they have good homes, can stay in their school districts, and whatever it may be. We just want to be able to do that. So we're looking big picture here at Housing for 2021. We're looking for allies. Many of them sit on the Mortgage Finance Authority, Senator Padilla, Senator Nancy Rodriguez, but the importance of asking, who your representative is, and if it's important to you, we definitely want them on our team. So definitely get out there and let them know it's important to you, so that we can have more allies in the legislature about this topic. Thank you, Representative Rubio, for that question.
Yeah, no, thanks so much to you, Representative. And I think one of the questions that was asked on the Facebook Live is, who are our champions? And that is a really important question, because that is really the strategy that we're going to be having over the course of the next couple months. Is we were sort of alone for a few months for the all summer long, and I think that the momentum that we were able to build as a coalition has led to other legislators wanting to come on board, because they're starting to realize how important it is for people to stay in their homes and to keep their shelter, but it also has a ripple effect in our neighborhoods and in our communities. When somebody loses their home, when a family loses their home, their children don't get to go to the same school anymore. So many different things that are major consequences to the fabric of our communities starts to really become dismantled. And I think a lot of folks in the legislature are starting to realize that. And so I think it's important that that you, whoever's listening right now, that you contact your legislator, both your senator and your representative, and you encourage them to support issues related to housing here in the state of New Mexico, and to really think big, to really want to think big in the same way that we're thinking about how do we transform housing here in the state. Maria, there's a question on the Facebook Live from someone that you might be able to answer, and this has to do with another variable factor in the equation, in which the state is now counting unemployment benefit income against SNAP benefits. Can you clarify about that, and whether or not that's accurate? And also, because the state wasn't doing that for the first 6 months of the pandemic, and now they will, how that will impact folks with their housing and the SNAP benefits once they're greatly reduced because of this as well.
I don't want to give an absolute answer, because I'm definitely not an expert on SNAP and how it's been changed with, I know there's new programs now with COVID. But if that person wants to contact me, or if there's a way to get us in touch with each other, I can put you in touch with the attorney in my office that can give you those answers very quickly.
Thank you, Maria. And for folks who are watching, we have about 20 minutes left on this forum. Please feel free to add your questions into the comment section, and we'll try to answer as many of those questions as possible. One other question that has been asked, and you touched upon it a little bit, Maria, and it's related to folks who have already been evicted. What are some of the possibilities that might exist at the moment, considering the Supreme Court's ruling, what's happened at the federal level with the moratorium? What happens to people who have already faced that eviction and moving forward?
Yeah, I think, it's a terrible situation. Like I said, I've heard from so many folks that are in this situation. Actually, just one in your district, Representative Rubio, in the last few days, I heard from someone who was evicted illegally. So I think the next best step depends on where you are in the process. So if you have just had a judgment issued against you, meaning the judge has ruled against you and said you have to be evicted, and they haven't followed the stay, but you're still in your home, contact a lawyer immediately at either New Mexico Legal Aid or call me. It's very important that you get in touch with a lawyer very timely to see if there's any steps that can be taken to keep you in your home. And there are probably a couple different strategies depending on your individual circumstances, whether it's, filling out the CDC order, which, we believe should keep the sheriff from physically coming to your home to remove you. If you're already out of your house, there's probably not a lot, unfortunately, that can be done to get you back into that same unit. The concern is obviously, how do you get into a new place? And it's often very hard when you have that judgment hanging over you, because many landlords will look to see if you have an eviction case that's been filed against you, if you have a judgment that's pending against you. And if you do, many landlords might not want to rent to you for fear that they would be put in a financial bind. And so, again, depending on your circumstances, and if you're within the time frame, you typically have 15 days to appeal an eviction case to district court. If you're within that time frame, it might make sense for you to appeal the case. And at least, if you run into a problem applying for a new apartment or new house, you can tell the new prospective landlord, look, I do have this judgment against me. I was evicted, but I have reason to believe it was illegal, and I'm appealing it. And that might be all, a new prospective landlord needs to know or hear to allow you into a new place. So it really just depends on your individual circumstances, but I would just, encourage everyone to get in touch with, especially New Mexico Legal Aid. But again, you can call me. And again, I have access to interpreters, and I can talk to anyone in almost any language.
Great. Thank you so much. Representative, did you want to follow up on that?
I did. I think, just given some of the chaotic situations that folks are in, I do want to highlight that many of our shelters, whether it be in a domestic violence situation and or an eviction situation, that our shelters have pivoted in many parts around the state to create more semi-permanent forms of housing, whether it be in a hotel, motel. They have basically different places on the spectrum. So if you're in that situation and you need some stable housing, many of these organizations have pivoted. I know the Santa Fe County area a lot better, Rio Arriba County a lot better with some of the shelter in place, if that's where you may be in northern New Mexico. But these are still options. And then on the spectrum of need, we know that we've seen increasing numbers for food access. If this is something that's happening, there are ways to get into our food depots around the state in order to make sure that your basic needs are met, whatever your situation may be. And we see that these numbers are increasing as more lockdowns are being put into place, and of course, just with the instability with different businesses closing even temporarily, with that sort of bridging the gap, there are options available. And so we're just trying to make sure that folks can meet their needs and not feel that they have to leave their shelter or leave their situation to get those needs met, especially if there's children in the situation. We want to make sure everyone is cared for across the spectrum, and we know that the need is rising, and so we just want to be able to meet that demand.
Thanks, Representative. One of the comments that's been made right now on Facebook Live, and this is an issue that we face a lot, especially here in southern New Mexico, is that many of the folks that we work with on a one-to-one basis come from either mixed status families or are completely undocumented. Rebecca, I do want you to share a little bit, if you can, regarding, just because I think those are some of the questions folks do have in terms of, do you have to be a citizen to apply for some of this funding? But also, Maria, I know that from what I understand, the New Mexico Legal Aid will only take your case if you are a U.S. citizen. That's what some folks have been hearing. Is that accurate? And if it is, what are some options that undocumented people might have in order to address issues around housing? Because I can almost imagine them being fearful about even reporting their landlord or even getting involved with that, knowing that their status is a big deal.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, it's a very good question, and I know it's certainly a big concern in New Mexico with so many mixed status families. For New Mexico legal aid, their client does have to either be a U.S. citizen or have, I believe, a green card or some other eligible status. It is true that they can't represent folks who are undocumented. But I believe, and I can't say for sure, I believe there are ways around that. So for example, you know, they might be able to represent one member in a household if one member has a green card, for example, but other members are undocumented. We have no restriction at the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty. So although we don't do a lot of direct representation, we don't take a lot of individual cases. It's certainly, I'm happy to talk with anyone, and we don't have those restrictions on immigration status. So if anybody just wants to call and ask questions, I'm happy to talk to them. And then, you know, and Rebecca, I'm sure will speak to this, but I know there are some financial assistance programs in the state that don't have immigration requirements, and it's a very complicated area of federal law that I won't get into, but it sort of matters who's dispersing the money and whether or not they have to abide by federal requirements based on immigration status, who they can give funding to. So it's probably way more complicated than anything we want to get into now, but again, I'm happy to talk to anybody if they want to call with questions.
Thanks so much, Maria. Rebecca, did you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, for our COVID-19 Housing Cost Assistance Program, our program rules do not address immigration status, and we will not be asking for any type of identification. That being said, you would still need to show financial hardship, the income qualification. You need to show us like a lease. As everybody else, we will not be asking for any type of identification or social security number.
Thanks, Rebecca. You know, that's good to know, and especially for those who are watching, because again, New Mexico is very much a multicultural state, which includes a lot of mixed status families. And as many of you know, or if you had been following the CARES Act back in the spring, undocumented people were completely left out of anything. And so the undocumented people were unable to qualify for any unemployment insurance. They were unable to qualify for anything that most typical people were able to qualify if they were being let go or their business was having to temporarily close down. And so it's really important that when it comes to issues related to shelter, that this information and that this knowledge be distributed to the people that you know who can greatly benefit from this, because there's so much limited resources out there, and they're part of our communities too. And so I think that's just important to raise. So one question that's been asked is, do we know yet the number of families who have been evicted here in the state of New Mexico?
We've been tracking this with the New Mexico University of New Mexico School of Law. In fact, a constituent and friend of mine is taking on this research and effort to help strengthen these laws. We do know that the number has declined since March, which is great, but the terrifying thing is that it's still happening, and it's in the hundreds, in particular in the Bernalillo area, Bernalillo County area. That means in the greatest population center, we're seeing the highest amount of evictions taking place. Nevertheless, most renters actually live in rural areas around the state. When you take the bulk of renters in comparison to any one metropolitan area, they're scattered around the state. And so despite the fact that we don't have exact numbers, and most of this problem is related to how the data is captured, we're trying to create a uniform way of understanding that with the courts. And and through this process of now knowing, you know, that this has been a real spotlight put on this issue, we can focus on this as something that we need to do moving forward. So we're still seeing the number, you know, fluctuate in the hundreds since March, but the fact that any one person, any one family had been evicted while we've been in the midst of a pandemic is unconscionable. It's something that we don't really know how it's happened, but unfortunately we're still trying to navigate through the court system to get that advocacy and get the information for those who may have been evicted. Mostly probably from what the data has said so far is just that they received a notice and they never even showed up to their court date, and their court date's actually on Zoom right now. Folks are getting evicted through Zoom, just like this. It's just absolutely terrifying to think that that's happening in our state, knowing that folks are in those situations. But nevertheless, we're trying to figure out how to do that. And I think the tightening of the legislation on the moratoriums and the accountability factors at so many levels on our courts to make sure that enforced policy is actually enforced, and how we do that. I think we've learned a lot through this emergency situation and the orders that have been in place. And these are the stories that we have to hear, unfortunately. And so the more that we do hear it, the more that we can advocate. So please reach out to us if you're in that situation. If you need help, we have legal resources. We have now financial resources. And so we just want to make sure that folks, we're late to the game. We know the runway has been long for folks, you know, trying to find these protections. But, you know, now that we do have them, we want to be able to get them in the hands of folks who need it the most.
Thanks, Representative. I was in mute again. No, thank you for that. It's really important for folks to, again, really understand that a lot of these efforts that are finally taking shape were started early on in this year. And unfortunately, that's how slow progress can be sometimes. And so we are certainly going to continue to work on these issues between now and the end of the year, especially working really, really hard to get a lot of these policies passed during the session in January. But it's critical that for those of you who are watching, that please look out for your family, for your friends, for your neighbors. Let them know that there are resources out there that could potentially help them, and please connect them to us. I'm very much available here on social media. You can find my contact info. The same can be said for Representative Romero, and Maria and Rebecca are just as resourceful. So please don't hesitate reaching out. We have about 8 minutes left, and we appreciate all the questions that everyone has asked. I think they've all been really great questions. Is there any last words that Rebecca, Maria, you'd like to share before we close out?
Yeah, I'll share something that Representative Romero just said made me think I need to say this when she was talking about court happening over Zoom. Probably the most important thing that tenants should know is if they get a notice for court, if their landlord's evicting them, go to court. So right now it's all happening over Zoom, but make sure you call in, because if you don't call in, if you don't attend your video Zoom court conference, you have no hope of staying in your home. The judge will rule against you by the simple fact that you're not there. They will issue a default judgment against you, meaning you just didn't show up, so the landlord wins. And there's no hope for you to, well, it's very likely that after the judge rules against you, the sheriff will be there to remove you from your home. So I know that getting a document saying you have to go to court is one of the most anxiety-provoking things that we as humans can get. It just makes your heart drop, no matter who you are. But the most important thing is don't avoid it. Don't pretend like it's not there. Go to court, and if even if call New Mexico Legal Aid, or Again, you can call and ask me questions. We can't really do individual representation, but try and get a lawyer through New Mexico Legal Aid. But if you can't, just go to court. Tell the judge you can't afford to pay rent. Again, it doesn't have to be a COVID-related reason. But that's the best advice I can give for staying in your home is don't avoid that court notice.
Thanks, Maria. Rebecca?
And I would just like to say, please, if you need help with your mortgage, your real estate contract, your mobile home payment, your rent, please apply to this program. You know, we have funding, probably not enough, but we have funding. And please go to our website, because even though it opens on November 2nd, there are lists there of the documentation you will need. And it's not my rules, it's the federal government's rules. So please, please work very hard to make sure you get the documentation correct and upload it, because the faster you get it and the more complete the application is, the faster we can provide your funding to your landlord. I'd also like to say, you know, kind of echoing what Representative Romero said, the need is huge and our funding is not quite enough. So really, any way you can encourage your elected officials to support programs like this is really helpful, because you know, you make it happen to fund programs like this.
Thanks, Rebecca. Representative, any last words of wisdom?
Wisdom, I don't know. You know, everybody's in uncharted territory. And I think, you know, there's been just so many waves of positivity and negativity and worry, and sometimes a breath of fresh air in the process. And right now we're kind of in that low end of the curve, just with the rising COVID numbers and some of the unknowns that we know going into the colder winter months. You know, it is so important that we know that folks feel like they have resources available to them in this most vulnerable time. You know, we just want folks to be able to shelter in place, to find that critical, you know, that the area that they can stay for now, at least until the end of the year. You know, we have those protections in place for eviction and for that moratorium. We're going to fight as hard as we can. We know we're going to still be in this pandemic, moving this forward. Who you vote for matters. What happens in the next 13 days really matters. And do hold your elected officials accountable. Ask them about how they feel about housing. Become an advocate. Every corner of the state of New Mexico has somebody that cares about this, who is an expert in this field. We've been so grateful and so lucky, Representative Rubio and I, to feel like we've met so many people who want to help with this. So you're not alone in this situation for folks who are facing this really, really critical time, wondering, where's my next rent paycheck going to come from? I can't afford this month. You know, what about the next? And at least we have 3 months in the queue for you. Please talk to your landlord. This is not a time to sort of grin and bear it. We want you to have an open dialogue, if you can, about your situation. Feel free to bring it to us. Feel free to bring it to folks who, you know, might be able to get some help and get some relief. We just want, you know, everybody to know. I know for me, this has been a terrifying time, wondering what I'm going to do as an unpaid legislator, as a student, and you know, where we recover moving forward. And I know so many people are making that calculation. You're not alone. We're with you, and we'll figure this out, and we'll do it together. We're strong, resilient. We see that every single day. So keep fighting the good fight. We're here for you. And we hope that you guys, you know, will let us know if you need help. And for everybody else who's continued to be the heroes for us all, thank you. And to Maria and to Rebecca and to Rep Rubio, thank you all for your advocacy, for your ongoing work. I couldn't do this without you, and I wouldn't be in this place to be able to help without you. So thank you. Thank you all, and thanks for attending. I know it's late on a Wednesday, but we're here for it. You know, this is what we love, and this is what we care about the most. So you know, just we're here to do our best.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Representative, and thank you all for watching and for listening in. The comments, I've gone ahead and copied and pasted all the important numbers for everyone. or websites for everyone. And again, if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We will do our very best to get back to you in a timely manner and make sure that we can do what we can to support you and your community. So with that, thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you all soon. Be safe, wear your masks, social distance. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Have a good one.